Japanese Americans were punished for what they were. My mother lost the war and she lost everything. She became most likely a entertainment person, which is a euphemism, you know what I mean?
Take a good look at the goddess who shook fallacies that I found in your books. Imperial house or a den full of crooks? The impact of trauma's historical hooks. I survive insane, always as good as it looks. But we're Ainu. We are diaspora. And we're here. Take a good look at the goddess who shook fallacies that I found in your books. Imperial house or a den full of crooks? The impact of trauma's historical hooks. I survive insane, always as good as it looks. But we're Ainu. We are diaspora. And we're here. Ancestors calling and I take a stand. Stepped on this journey to know who I am. And here I find displacement from land. Feet never again to touch ancestral sands. More purpose than to be comfort woman. She stepped on the boat to this distant land. Without her I'd never be who I am.
That's why I feel the way that I am. I can't help myself that I don't have the same strong feelings about being Ainu. Exactly the same as what I feel for being Japanese or Japanese American.
Body so beaten it hurts just to sneeze. Praying and hoping that no one would see. Picture the young bride right after she bleeds. Bongo tag now, she got mouths to feed. All to escape homeland poverty. Who could blame her for having a dream? Unaware of despair that her life would mean. So take a good look at the goddess who shook fallacies that I found in your books. Imperial house or a den full of crooks? The impact of trauma's historical hooks. I survive insane, always as good as it looks. I survive insane, always as good as it looks. But we're Ainu. We are diaspora. And we're here. I'm here.
She was a war bride. She suffered a lot. I have no doubt what she really did. But she kowtowed a lot of times. She always was saying, I'm sorry, sumimasen, I'm so sorry, that kind of thing. She was so polite. And it used to kill me to see how much she belittled herself. It used to kill me. I couldn't stand it.
E wano luna e pino lalo e huina moku e kuana kapaya. E wano luna e pino lalo e huina moku e kuana kapaya. E wano luna e pino lalo e huina moku e kuana kapaya.
Mahalo e maluhia. Aloha kako o Vauno o Māpuana. My name is Māpuana. This is my son Maluhia. During our last broadcast, we left you off with the mana'o or thoughts of the elders of our community of Ainu and diaspora. During this broadcast, we start off our live stream discussion with the voices of our youth. And through our history as Ainu and diaspora, many times we traveled across the Pacific as people that were trafficked, as laborers or indentured servants. Oftentimes, we found shelter at the hands of the indigenous people in the lands that we traveled to. And as a result, many of us as Ainu and diaspora are mixed with the bloodlines of the indigenous people of the lands that we've traveled to. So, for example, my son Maluhia is Ainu and Kanaka Maoli, and I would like to introduce you to Anjamora, who is a youth from New Mexico.
Hi everyone, my name is Anjamora and I am from the Taos Pueblos and here in New Mexico. I just wanted to have a moment of reflection for the lands that we stand on and the indigenous lands that we stand on, and where my people are from, and the importance of how sacred it is and how valued it is in our culture. And I just want to talk a little bit about the importance of that. I am here on behalf of the youth and on behalf of the indigenous community, and just acknowledging the fact that we are all human and we are all indigenous to some part of land, and that we are all within this corrupt society where our traditions and our values have been stripped away and taken away from us. And it's super, super important to be able to arise that and be able to claim our indigeneity and be able to really tune into our power within the indigenous community. And people from all parts of the land are all indigenous to this Mama Earth, and it is so important to be able to give back and be able to understand that we are loved and we are supported by this earth. And yeah, that's what I have to say.
Welcome, everyone. We appreciate you all being here. I want to start off by reminding you all, my name is Sachi Edwards. I am going to be moderating our panel today, but I feel the need, like last time, like our panel last week, I feel the need to preface this conversation by reminding everyone that many Ainu and diaspora families, or many Ainu and diaspora who are alive today, come from families that hid their Ainu identity for the sake of survival. And so many of us today are working on strengthening and reconnecting our cultural heritage that has been weakened due to colonial violence. So in our last event, panelists even shared that they've experienced skepticism from others, including from those in the Japanese American community when disclosing their Ainu identities. So as you listen today, please be aware that it isn't the responsibility of Ainu and diaspora to prove to non-Ainu people that they are Ainu, and that the ways Ainu and diaspora are using art today to affirm and perpetuate their Ainu identity doesn't always look like traditional Ainu art, although sometimes it does. But today, the Ainu artists that you'll hear from are going to share with us how art in various forms is used by the diaspora community to rebuild a sense of culture and community in whatever spaces and places they're in, which for many of us is not Ainu Moshiri or our ancestral homelands. So with that, I would really like for all of our panelists to be able to introduce themselves.
Irang karapte, kanayakne Seta, kuneruene, kanayakne Repunkuru Ainu kuneruene. dxWdəwʔabš moshiri orwanokek, ihwalas moshiri ta'an. Tan moshiri anakne dxWdəwʔabj, dxўlilap, skajet, dxўdəwʔabj, kor moshiri ruene. Iaire kere iotasanke no anpe. Tikwitsid. My name is Seta. I was born in occupied dxWdəwʔabj territory, and I'm currently being displaced to occupied dxўlilap territory. I'm a multimedia artist, and I use illustration, clothwork, and the written word to explore my place as Repunkuru Ainu.
Thank you, Seta. I think we're going to have Léo introduce themselves now. Léo, your microphone is muted. Can you unmute yourself and
so sorry,
introduce yourself again?
That entirely muted. Irang karapte. My name is Léo Anderson. I currently reside in Tokyo, Japan. I moved back here around half a year ago from America, where I went to college in Ohio. I am a multimedia artist. I paint and I sculpt. I paint primarily in oils, but I also do digital work as well. And I mostly use clay for my sculptures. But occasionally, as you also see on the screen, I do woodblock print as well. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Madi Sato, and I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I am half Ainu and half Irish Finnish. And these are photos of my Oba-chan. Her name is Ishi Sato. And I am a singer and songwriter and have also been, for the past 15 years, leading women's community in reclaiming their voices through their indigenous songs from many places around the world in service and honor to the earth And it's my honor to be here today. And I pray that the ancestors are with me, and Apehuchi Kamui and Wakaush Kamui are with me in this expression today. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, I am her daughter and my name is, you've already heard, but my name is Anjamora, and I am from the Taos Pueblo and also Ainu, and I use my artistry through song and music to create in a form of activism for like my immediate community regarding MMIW and Indigenous rights within my community.
My name is Dr. Māpuana Shizuko Hayashi-Simpliciano. People call me Katana. I got that name as a nickname growing up as a hip-hop artist and battle MC. Later on, I grew into a spoken word slam artist, and currently I call myself a hip-hop ethnographer, where I collect stories of Native people and I share those stories through the genre of hip-hop. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you everyone for those introductions. And now I'd like to sort of kick off the main panel portion of our session today with a question for each of you. Can you share a little bit more about what being Ainu in diaspora means to you and how you see your art as part of you living your Ainu identity? And maybe why do you think art is a vehicle for Ainu identity development that so many Ainu in diaspora rely
on? For me, identifying as a member of Ainu diaspora is a reflection of my decision to position myself within the context of my ancestors' homelands. Identifying as Repunkuru specifically, which means people living across the ocean from Ainu Mashiri, recognizes my position as a national outsider to Ainu Mashiri. I'm not Nikkei, I'm not Japanese American, I'm not even Ainu American. I do not pledge allegiance to America. It is simply the empire claiming my labor. All of these terms are the deliberate navigation of my identity within the context of an Ainuic worldview. As members of people who are currently occupied by two enemy nations, we must necessarily explore our identity as art, because we have been denied our experiences through culture. We didn't have a word for art before the Japanese put it behind glass. Before that, it was just called living our life.
So that's it's kind of a multi-part question, so I'll try to break it down as I go. But for me, being in diaspora, I think is this is a very emotional answer, but longing. For me, I think it is seeking a place to belong to or a community to belong to, almost like seeking a home. I think that is informed also by my personal background, as I grew up moving from city to city every 4 years. So for me, I think my positionality is a little different because my family is in Hokkaido, and I do have access to Ainu Moshiri in that land. And my mother grew up there, and it's a place I always return to. So it feels like a home to me, even though I never grew up there. And then through discovering my family history and my roots, it felt very affirming. It felt like there was a reason why I was so connected to the land, and that I became so emotional every time I would leave and come back and return. So it really helped me feel further connected in that sense, and also with the wider Ainu community, as I learned there was more and more people who were who were like my grandmother. I would see her in other people's faces, and that would just make me so emotional, and so happy and overjoyed. But I think being a diaspora means always that longing, I think, for my family, for what I feel like is my homeland. Yeah, so it's a bittersweet emotion. In terms of art making, I think art has helped me connect and communicate with other Ainu people, both in diaspora and within Hokkaido. And I think that art making is a very organic practice. I think it's always growing and changing with us, with our emotions and our circumstances and our memories. And I think this really sharply contrasts with how Ainu have historically been seen through a very kind of archaic archaeological lens, as fixed and boxed into the past. And I think that the reason why so many Ainu rely on art is it helps break those preconceptions, and it really allows us to, it gives us agency to express our lived experiences, I think. As well as help connect and communicate with others, with other Ainu people, and also people outside of our community, to express who we believe we are in our own terms and our own words. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Hearing the two artists before me can relate so much to all of your words, and to say that I am first generation here in America, and my father is from Tohoku region, all my relatives there, and the stories they told me is that no one had ever left that region, I don't know, hundreds of years. My father was the first, and on your last live stream, we were speaking about some of the ways that generational trauma affects how we live. And I've been feeling into that and sensing that my father left for a reason. And there, we don't know all the reasons why, but this pain of being, you know, torn from your indigenous ways and the songs and the ceremonies and that kind of thing must have been heartbreaking for the whole family. And so being here in America, you know, we tried to move back to Japan, but my father passed away when I was 5 years old. So we moved back, and I found myself in the community of the Cherokee people and being raised in ceremony and prayer. And one thing I always felt in those ceremonies and prayers is that all the ancestors would come, and it would be a direct connection. And so I feel that that longing, as Leo was expressing, to connect with my ancestors, and then honestly through the prayers to them. I've made an altar, you know, 7 years ago, shifting from a Japanese style altar to more of an Ainu altar, and prayed to the ancestors. And in my life of ceremony, the Ainu ancestors began to show up, and I began to receive and hear songs in the ways that I was shown as a child, that ceremony songs, prayer songs come, is in that very much listening way. And even though there's long traditions of songs, there's some point when that song was birthed. And that's how I've been experiencing some of these Ainu songs, is learning them and mimicking them, but from the prayers, the new songs are rising up. So for me, my art is, it was in the beginning very much a path of a performing artist, singer, songwriter, but, you know, steeped in the foundation of singing prayer songs, Cherokee prayer songs. And then as I became a mother, and now I'm a mother of 3 children, that whole way came back, because I felt the importance of passing on to the young ones. And so it was an honest prayer for me to connect with the ancestors. And that song that I sang that was in the video in the snow was a prayer that I have just for many years been doing in more ceremonial way. And then my longing, the heart took me out when the snow beings, the kamui, began to fall in my homeland here in Santa Fe in the mountains, and I was moved to do that dance. And that dance is really traditionally done as a communal dance where the mother cranes are teaching the little cranes how to fly. And so it's a little strange to be without the community around, but I do have my family and daughter Anjamora, who just from being in the presence of the ceremonies and the songs and the dances is just being infused with that. So I wonder how it feels for you to hear these songs and lift them up sometimes, and if you feel that connection to your Ainu self.
I will keep this brief, but I feel that there is so much power and there is so much life within these songs, and songs and language especially is something that is carried on through tradition and is the foundation for the culture, and then is incorporated within prayer, because song is prayer and expression is prayer. So yeah, it's definitely very, very charged, and it's a way that we can definitely connect to that.
I'm going to try to get through this without crying. Very emotional for me. 4 years ago, when I set out to write my dissertation about Ainu and diaspora, I looked in the literature and I didn't see myself there. I didn't see my history there. Fortunately, because of Google, I found, first off, I have to take a step back. I've published around this concept of Ainu and diaspora, but the very first person that I know of to really use this term is Seta. Right? So Seta was just this brilliant blogger that was writing about Ainu and diaspora. And, you know, through her, I was just like, wow, this is my history. I see myself. There's a word for us. There's a term for us. Ainu and diaspora is used in the literature to talk about the movement of Ainu outside of Hokkaido and to Tokyo. But other than that, you don't see anything. Growing up, I heard stories from my elders, and they would point out other people and let me know that they were Ainu here in Hawaii, and that basically we were laborers. Many of us were indentured servants, and that's how we came here to Hawaii to work in the plantations here that were modeled after Southern American plantations, basically modeled after slavery. So when, for me, learning from Seta about Ainu in diaspora, that there was a word for somebody like me, just meant the world to me, because before that, I was told I was Ainu, but I was told it wasn't something that you talked about. It was something that, you know, yes, you could be proud of it, but don't say anything to anybody on the outside, because they would turn around and do something or turn around and say something that would make you not proud of it. So you always kind of had to protect this secret. And so for me, being in Ainu and diaspora, it's survivance, right? It's our way of just perpetuating our Ainu-ness, and it feels good. 4 years ago, I thought I was alone, and I'm sitting up here with all of these artists that are also Ainu. And for me, that just means the world to me, to know that not only I have a community, but we open this session with a voice of my children, that we're finding each other through art, and that my children will have a community one day of other Ainu and diaspora that understand that this unfortunate history, which is painful to talk about, but at the same time, when we really look at this history, there are narratives of resistance. There's a lot of strength and there's a lot of resilience in our histories. And so when I think of being Ainu and diaspora, when I see Ainu art, I'm seeing so much to be proud of and so much to be thankful for, because there's a lot of privileges in this world that I was not born with, but one of those is being an Ainu in diaspora, and that's how I feel today.
Thank you for sharing those heartfelt and emotional responses. I want to ask another question for everyone. In what ways has learning from and or building relationships with other indigenous communities and art forms informed your art and your Ainu identity? I know that some of you have sort of already mentioned that, but I want to have a more, explicit conversation about that specifically.
I grew up in Coast Salish country, here in what's been colonized as Washington State. I grew up in West Seattle with a really mixed group of people, and part of our early curriculum was actually learning about the culture, customs, and history of our local tribes. And I feel really fortunate to, it wasn't until I got older and moved into more wider areas that was not typical of any level of education. But in grade school, I feel like I really lucked out in ending up in a school that understood the importance of, one, the diversity of all of their students, but also of the first history of the place that they're educating from. And in that way, in hindsight, I feel like I received almost like a shadow Ainu education, because as I learned much later, so much of our own customs, particularly for my ancestors' tribe in the Punayoro region of Shiraoi Kotan in Yonmoshiri, how similar so many of the customs were, just the worldview, the appreciation of life outside the human being, the respect for life as a system that works together, or it doesn't really work at all. And growing up around so much visible, gorgeous Coast Salish artistic traditions has been really inspiring for me. Again, you'll see a lot of similarities between Coast Salish formline art and Ainu forms. And it's just growing up around that sort of pride for one's culture, for the indigenous culture, for that inherently growing up with to value those practices, those worldviews. I feel like it wasn't such a leap, learning the lessons of my own utari, and having appreciation for, these really bold, graphic designs. If you look at Ainu art, it looks so modern and contemporary, which is how I always felt about formline art. There's the little, I eventually got past the little kid part of my brain that assumed that everything's new all the time, and realizing, oh, this artwork that looks so fresh and modern and contemporary is ancient, and kind of feeling again just not coming from a place of seeing indigenous as primitive or behind or dead or any of those things. I feel like growing up around a community that has such belief in itself helped extend to how I relate back to my own ancestors in Ainu Mashiri.
So I haven't actually had the privilege of learning from or working with other indigenous communities directly before, but when I was starting to research my roots and look into Ainu history more, um, I came across our relationship with the Maori people and how there were exchange programs between the Ainu and Maori, I think starting maybe in the 80s, maybe it was a little earlier or after. Um, but this is in the Japanese context of Ainu in Japan. Um, but that then led me to read more about their cultural revitalization efforts and what Ainu in Japan were learning from Maori through those exchanges. But I think a big part of what I think I learned and kind of was processing as I was reading this is, like Katana said, I think there was a really big history of suppression of difference and it's very Ainu have always had to hide that they were Ainu, um, and in Japan it's very difficult being a minority, no matter what kind of minority you are. And I think that when I was reading and watching these documentaries of these exchange programs, a lot of what I knew were taking away from it was very moving to see Maori people being so open and proud and loving of their culture and their people. And I think as I was reading this secondhand, I was kind of experiencing it first person. And I think I was just so inspired to see. I think one thing that really struck me was seeing a TV channel entirely in the Maori language, and reading that that had been something that was just several decades of revitalization, and thinking, wow, that's amazing that they have come so far in such little time, and that really gave me hope that we Ainu too could do the same thing, and that even though there is this very harmful conception that Ainu are endangered, that this is definitely that came out of the colonial history of the Japanese government, that Ainu are a dead people, that our culture and our language is lost, that that's not true at all, and we can always grow and continue to flourish. So that was really what I kind of took away from that. And specifically for Indigenous art, I think this is a personal interest of mine, but I was really fascinated by Maori tattooing practice and how they passed on that knowledge and that culture, because I would really like to in the future one day be part of the effort to revive Ainu tattooing practices. I've always been fascinated with tattoos and tattooing, but also there's just so much meaning imbued in Ainu tattooing practice, and even just the use of wood bark and the ceremonial aspects is just so precise and meaningful. And there's such a stigma against tattoos in Japan, and it's associated with criminality and it's associated with these things, but also Ainu tattooing was banned explicitly by law historically. And so I always get very upset when I talk to Japanese people and they have these preconceptions about tattooing without realizing how discriminatory it is towards indigenous people in Japan. And so that is a personal, I guess, dream of mine, but I'm very inspired by just a lot of the things that I read, yeah, about the Māori culture.
I was just feeling into how I really have such appreciation for all the indigenous peoples around the world, including my European, Irish and Finnish, and learning so much about the Sami people as well. And just to say that it was interesting because even though I was raised in the indigenous spiritual ways of the Cherokee, when I became teenager, my daughter's age, I got so into the singing and songwriting and the music, and I didn't quite connect my heritage and the indigenous ways into that music for a long while. And so I was on that path of you know, sort of mainstream music and art creation. And then when I became a mother, which is a huge initiation of like recognizing that we're here to serve and to give back to the young ones for the next generations. And I, at that same time, married a man who very much, at this point, was on the Lakota way path for 25 years. So I found myself coming back to the ways and taking a big break from making music for art. And it wasn't until, well, I guess I have to say that I went into Japanese music so strongly because of the whole silencing of anything to do with Ainu heritage in my family in Tohoku. And so to honor and to connect to my family there, I did 15 years studies of Nihon Minyo, the folk songs, the Shigin music of Japan, and then worked with taiko drummers, you know, koto players, shakuhachi flute players, and all the while doing the ceremony as a way of life. And more and more, it was like I just kept getting that nudge and that call, and interesting things would happen where some of my relatives in Japan would send me Ainu music, and I'd say, this is just the same as all of our ceremony music when we're in the ceremony. And so, yeah, I just feel like it was good to take that pause as an artist in the Western world for about a decade. And only I would come out and sing honoring these Japanese songs. And then 7 years ago, I was awarded a scholarship from our Japanese community here. And they told me, go study your Ainu ancestry, however you can. And so that started the journey of me opening some of these amazing books that exist that tell the stories. And through those stories, my heart would just open and I began to have dreams of my ancestors. And that's where then from the story to the dream, then the song emerged. And for these past 7 years, have honestly only sung these songs in the prayers and haven't really shared them until this new year, after this really initiatory year of COVID for all of us to really go inward and be with what is truly important to us. And at the new year, I offered these songs that I've been singing for so many years to the spirits of the land that I live on. And in a way, I just invited a few of my closest relatives and said, I want to throw a party for the gods and release these songs. And in a way, you know, it felt like the ancestors and the songs saying, we're ready. We want to go outside of the lodge. And so from that, you know, things have been moving along, and I had this sort of big experience of walking back into a recording studio after a decade. And sort of breaking down because I had been in practice with the indigenous ceremonies for, you know, over the last decade when I stopped doing my performance. And I said, I can't separate anymore the prayer and the appreciation of the ancestors and the honoring of these songs. And I'm coming here to ask for you to with me, not to make these songs as beings that are commodified or exploited in any way. I'm here to make them as a service, to give them back to the earth, give them back to the ancestors. And it was like a breaking down and realizing that, you know, it's not an easy path to walk to bring indigenous songs into art. And you know, we have to be very, humble about it and conscious about it. And I'm going to hand it over to Anja here because, I feel like the youth maybe don't have that, you know, in my generation, there was a lot of, and there needs to be some healthy boundary and separation with what is shared in the ceremonies, in the tradition, and what is shared through art. But we're finding our way, and Anjamora is a big part of that. And the process that we were in this last year as well, her coming of age and many ceremonies, the ancestors were speaking so loudly that I began to dream and see the tattooing. And this came to me, and I asked permission of Anja, do you want these markings that would have been done at the coming of age of the young women to go through an initiation rites into becoming a woman? And she agreed, and we went through a really big ceremony of trying to our best in our broken ways to go to Apehuchi Kamui, the sacred fire, and say, help us, show us, we want to connect with you, and we don't want to appropriate in any ways, we want to honor. And so everything was done, I feel, with that heart intention of honoring the ancestors, and this tattoo ceremony was so profound. And really, the ancestors came in when the skin was broken, and we did it with the fire, the charcoal, and that kind of thing. So, do you want to speak about anything that I've opened up about the tattooing, or how indigenous ways have influenced how you've connected with your art? It's anything.
Well, I guess I want to spread awareness right now. I'm feeling like there is so much healing that needs to go on for the indigenous communities, the Ainu community, and the separation between the people from the indigenous land and the people that have been colonized and put into this land that is created home for us now, but it is something that we feel that we want to connect back to because it is a part of us, and it's something that is so important to us, and that is something that is within our bones. And coming from the Native American community here, there is definitely a lot of separation between people who were raised on the res and people who weren't, people who experience the traditional ceremonies and dances, and people who don't. And it's this whole separation that really needs to be stripped down, because there is so much healing, and to become living unity and create something beautiful, we all have to be in agreement. And I don't know, just opening our hearts and being able to truly fall back into our natural organic form and be able to connect with our relatives, I think, is something really important.
Like that little Kanaka that I pushed from my womb, Hawaiian soul of George Helm that they tried to entomb, like that Haloa Naka that they want to consume at their luau's and their hotels that we not welcome to. I'm telling you, Wahine Toa coming through. I'm repping them native stories, Kanaka Maole to the Ainu. So don't let them bite you, cousin. When they tell you give aloha, the only damn thing that they giving to me in Fliderente want to blow up. Hold up. I can't believe what's on the TV. Colin Elder, 6 feet under, drunken Dee walking freely. You tell me, when will enough be enough? Sick and tired of seeing Professor Kalekoa in the cuffs. Sick and tired of seeing our Mauna Kia'i in the cuffs. So for me, I dropped that little rhyme just as an example. For me, hip hop truly was a culture. For me, it was a culture that I could see myself in, that I felt like I had a voice in. And it was a culture that taught me that oration had a place, right? And so here I am in Hawaii. I, have ancestral ties here. Hawaii was once the most literate nation in the world. And in 2 generations, we lost our native language because native language was stripped from every educational institution in Hawaii once our government was attacked and illegally overthrown by American businessmen, right? So, I was born right around the time, I'm not a young spring chicken like others up on this panel. I was born right around the time of the Hawaiian Renaissance, but that hadn't really translated through the community yet. So I still had my Hawaiian family that was holding on to shame of being Hawaiian, a lot of historical trauma around being Kanaka Maoli, and a lot of historical trauma around speaking your native language, right? And so, I have family members that were, beaten for speaking their native language, right? And so it's important that we recognize that. And so I want to share, currently I work in Hawaiian language and cultural restoration and revitalization. And I've been able to be in a seat where I've taken part in cultural exchanges with Ainu students and Kanaka Maoli students. And it's great that Leo is actually mentioning tattooing. Blank skin. I always wanted to actually start up a group of Ainu women as tattoo artists, similar to the way that Inuit are reviving it. But I bring this up because in my seat with these cultural exchanges, I've had experience where Ainu students came down to Hokkaido. They saw our principal at our school who wears traditional maka. He wears traditional, he's traditionally tattooed on his face, on his head, all over his body, right? And this is not fashion. This is a part of our spirituality. Same thing with Ainu culture. It's a part of our, genealogy, right? And the first thing that they said was, why are you letting a criminal on campus? They had no idea. They couldn't, in their lens, they couldn't see that a person, an educated person in leadership would have tattoos, right? So, for me, I learned a lot about my stance as an Aboriginal woman from hip hop. From hip hop, the culture of hip hop, I learned that resistance was okay. I learned that oration was okay. And I also learned that sometimes you need to argue, and it's okay for a woman to argue. Consequently, I come from cultures where argument was valued. Ainu women, we practice charanke, right? Or Ainu people practice charanke. And argument was valued and it was okay. And so without my native language, and that's not my fault, I was born without my native language. Hip hop was the culture that helped me to value those things, because the colonial culture was telling me that I was Japanese, I was a female, I was to sit down, be quiet, and look like a little doll. That's what the culture was telling me. And so through the culture of hip hop, I learned that it was okay to orate and to be expressive and to be argumentative when I needed to be.
Okay, thank you so much. I feel like we're learning a lot, and I appreciate so far the audience comments that have shown support and appreciation. It's really lovely to see. I have a couple of questions for individual panelists, and I just want to remind the audience that they can always ask their questions. We will receive them. So I have a few more questions, and then we will turn it over to the audience. So the first one I have is for Seta. You were actually the first person, as Māpuana named earlier, was the first person to coin the term Ainu in diaspora, and you also, I know, use the term Repunkuru. Can you talk a little bit about this movement of Ainu in diaspora art and why it's important?
Sure. In keeping up with the tradition of honoring our genealogy of knowledge, I'd like to point out that I first heard the term diaspora from the artist David Byrne. Many people might recognize him as the lead singer of Talking Heads, but he also, throughout his career, has really demonstrated this creative and academic interest in the African diaspora cultural thrivance in South America, with a particular focus on the Candomblé community in Bahia in Brazil. And learning about the ancestor-centric community and religion of the Candomblé communities really primed my own understanding of ancestor veneration in the Ainuic worldview. Mapu and I have spoken briefly a few times, remarking how similar voodoo is to our own ancestor worship, to our own culture. And with that in mind, I'd also like to acknowledge the global African diaspora who, through no consent of their own, have been put into positions necessitating the resisting of oppressive systems by which the rest of us continue to take notes and learn from. Like the tradition of hip-hop, it's not only the indigenous nations of Turtle Island that we learn so much from, but also the global struggle of the African diaspora people. And so it's, I feel like exploring our culture through this artistic lens gives us a lot of elbow room to maneuver and to ask questions and to experiment, because there's a lot of things that, as diaspora people, there's so much genealogy of knowledge that has been disrupted. So we're always afraid of doing the wrong thing or disrespecting the Kambui or to our utari in Ainu Moshiri, or doing, the wrong thing, because so much of it is woven with 10,000 years of tradition. And we're like, oh my God, I'm going to be on the scene and like mess something up or something. Although I feel like, given that our culture has survived thus far, it probably has room for us diaspora to stumble our way through it too. It's, very resilient, even to the folks who are taking our baby steps into this culture. And I think that art is something that's very easy to understand between cultures, when we talk about a culture's history, when we want to talk about their achievements, their mark on the world, what we look at is their art, is their creative expression, whether it's literature, oration, painting, carving, pottery, any of those things. We're not as interested in what the, gross GDP of Renaissance era countries were, any of that nonsense. It's like all very sort of boring stuff. But when we actually want to examine the soul of a people, we look at their creative expression. And I feel that it's the same way looking in to our own culture as it is admiring the expression and culture and survivance and thrivance of other community around us.
Thank you. I also have a question for Léo. Can you tell us a little bit about the showcase for Ainu artists that you were previously involved with, and maybe talk a little bit about why you think it's important for Ainu artists to have their own platform like that?
So I was previously, I'm a recent graduate of Oberlin College in Ohio. And I was part of a showcase along with Professor Chie Sakakibara, who had previously had a grant to go to Hokkaido and do some research on the Ainu. And it was just an amazing coincidence that she happened to do this while I was a student at the college. But I was able to reach out to her and start talking about a project that she was planning with one of the curators there. We have a museum called the Allen Memorial Art Museum in Oberlin College, and so the showcase was planning to. It has currently been offset because of the pandemic, so I'm not sure exactly when it's going to happen. But it was planning to invite a multitude of a range of activists and artists from Hokkaido, many of whom I follow their Instagrams, and so they're kind of big name in the community here. Oki Dub, who is a musician, his father, Biki, was just a huge inspiration of mine. His father was a sculptor and a modern Ainu artist who participated in some of the Ainu activism in the 70s, and unfortunately he's no longer with us, but his son, Oki, is an amazing musician, and I got to see him live when he came to my college, so I'm a huge fan. So some of these artists were going to be invited, and they would have performances, but also be able to hold workshops as well. Some on the craftsmanship, but also some even we were talking about maybe a small language workshop. So it was very, very, very exciting prospects that. So I got to help a little bit with some of the discussions about maybe some of the art pieces that would be curated in the exhibition that would be held alongside that. But going back to I think why having our own platform is really important for Ainu artists. I want to preface a little bit with the socio-political kind of environment right now. Currently in Japan, I think since the indigenous law was passed very recently, I think it was last year maybe, recognizing that Ainu are the indigenous people of Japan, there's been a lot of new attention garnered towards Ainu people. I know there's been a manga released, Golden Kamuy, and a lot of Japanese have been into that. And so for the first time, I think there's a widespread awareness of Ainu people and more interest in our culture. But at the same time, I think that there is a certain kind of shift in the framing of Ainu culture and art going on. I think there's this push for a cosmetic multiculturalism, is a term that I've read by the Japanese government to promote tourism to Hokkaido. And I see that going back to just even my grandparents' house, just around our neighborhood is become a very touristy kind of, I think gentrification is a strong word, but there's a lot of new money coming in, and the way that the town looks has definitely changed. And we aren't even an explicitly Ainu area. And so I've seen kind of this promotion of aesthetically pleasing or performative aspects of identity, of Ainu identity. So the government likes to promote highly traditional forms of art. And I think that because it is marketable for them. And I think that things that are more political, things that talk a little more about social nuance, things that might be dangerous for them, or things that might be oppositional or confrontational with the government, or even talk about our colonial history. Those are things that are not allowed is a strong word, but are not promoted by the government. And I think this is also tied to art is as a political vehicle. I think art is as political as anything else. And so it's like, who decide what is good art? What is art that is deserving of being shown? And I think that the government does have a large role to play in that. This is kind of a tangent, but I also see a lot of times Ainu art is marketed as craftsmanship. They don't like to use the word art, as though our culture is not deserving of being art with a capital A, like the fine art that is in museums. And I think that there is, and as I think was mentioned previously, some of the participants in this panel, which was talking about, putting our culture behind a glass panel. Like, I don't support art as this dead artificial thing. I think that it is a living, growing part of being alive and being a part of our culture. But also there is kind of a status that comes with calling something art. And so I think that there is all this politics tied up in the way that Ainu culture is seen and consumed and framed. So within all that, sorry, that was a huge tangent. There's so many points that I made, but I think it's so important for Ainu artists, especially contemporary Ainu artists and young up-and-coming Ainu artists. I think it's important for us to have a platform to express our version of our stories, and be able to develop new art forms and expressions for Ainu identity that are being produced in the 21st century. What it means to be Indigenous now. The opinions that we have, our lived experiences. And I think what was so wonderful about the project in the Allen Memorial Art Museum was that there was the workshops alongside the exhibition. So it wasn't just the works behind the glass, where people go and look at something that's sterile and have their own preconceptions and conclusions from looking at it, but that they could talk to the artists themselves and they can engage and ask questions and have this very equal and open exchange with them. So the artists could explain in their own words who they are and what their work is about. And that allows Ainu artists of so many different voices and perspectives, because there is no just one single Ainu experience, even within the diaspora, I think, or even within people living in the same town in Biatori or Shiraoi. But so I think that allows us to provide context and framing around our work, and also be able to promote our voice in the way that we want to.
Thank you. Some of the things that you said sort of very nicely, organically lead into some of the questions from the audience. So I'm just going to ask one of them from Marissa Nakata. What advice or gifts of knowledge would you want to impart to young Ainu and Indigenous artists?
I'm going to go ahead and start because I've been thinking about this one. And I know a lot of Indigenous artists who kind of are exploring their place in the world, in history, in culture through art, and have a lot of, we all deal so much with imposter syndrome, and again, not wanting to step on 10,000 years of what we kind of imagine is crystallized perfect history of our ancestors. And you know, we're assuming we're all coming from the same place of, you know, actually wanting to honor our history and our ancestors. You know, I would say to really give yourself a break, and not worry. So if you are an indigenous person, and you're all an indigenous people, you're either, you know, indigenous or you're diaspora indigenous. However you explore your own identity cannot be inauthentic. Whatever you do, as if you're an Ainu artist, if you're an indigenous artist, however you explore that through your own creativity, it is inherently an Ainuic artistic expression. It's inherently an indigenous experiment or exploration in how to celebrate your own worldview expression. So I wouldn't worry too much about, I gotta be Ainu just right, or I have to be, you know, wherever you identify, however you're trying to represent, you are somebody who is also Ainu. What you do, your work is also Ainu. Your work is also indigenous, even if it doesn't look exactly like your neighbors or your ancestors. You know, there's a lot of that sort of, you know, imposter syndrome kind of thing that if you're able to, you know, maybe set at the door of your studio before you go and kind of try and, you know, talk to the artistic komoi, or however you're self-exploring and self-expressing.
Anyone else? Or I can go on to the next one, I suppose. Okay. Let's see. All right, this question is from Samo Abdallah. As a non-Ainu and an ally who wants to learn about Ainu culture, art, and language, where can they start as a beginner?
Check out anything written by Kayano Shigeru, an Ainu Ikashi, politician, author, creative. He's one of the few Ainu authors that I'm aware of who is published in English. So if you do speak English, that may work published directly from an Ainu author and elder will always be invaluable. There's a lot of, he's published a lot of books that do have sort of like introduction to Ainu culture. So anything written from directly by an Ainu author, highly, highly recommend.
I have a quick tip for people that want to be allies, especially to Ainu in diaspora, is that if you know Ainu, connect us to each other. So on Facebook, we have the Ainu and Ainuic Heritage Education Society. Many of us really enjoy connecting with each other, you know, through social media and feeling that bond within the community. So do that for us, and we promise to do that for you as well. Connect us with each other if you know Ainu in different places.
Okay, so we have a quick video from Anjamora that we want to play now, and then I'm going to, it's a short video, but then I want to ask Anjamora to answer a question about it, but I thought maybe it would be better to show the video first so that she can then respond to it afterwards. So we're gonna see that video now.
You are not forgotten. Hi, my name is Anjamora Ishi Sato, and I am from the Taos and Jemez Pueblos, and I'm also from the Ainu people of Japan. I am here on behalf of the youth and sharing my voice regarding the honoring of MMIW Day. As a youth and in the youth culture, we are within the school system where we hear nothing about this. I never heard of MMIW and the importance and the bigness of MMIW. I feel like as a whole within society, and especially the education system, that all of these harder and heavy topics aren't talked about a lot, which I think should be shifted within especially the youth's perspective, because there are so many people who have no idea about the trauma within the Indigenous women's community and the hurting and all the abuse that goes around and the stolen sisters, and that this happens every single day, and it is not shown at all within the bigger picture. And I think that that is a big, much needed shift that needs to be going on. As of recently, I'm homeschooling due to online schooling, which is not at all life-giving, and so I decided to take a break from that and homeschool this year. And I've taken a lot of time to be able to put myself out there and be able to be incorporated with many organizations and collaborations with things that are important to me and things that was never taught to me in the school system. I was asked to be a part of a MMIW project, Spirit Line, which was a collaboration with Clara Natanaba and Three Sisters Collective, and it was a collection of voices from around New Mexico sharing the importance of MMIW using their arts, meaning dance and poetry and song and all of that. I'm going to be sharing a chant I made about 2 years ago when I was first introduced to the importance of MMIW. I feel that this chant is a communal change that we can all know that we remember and we are here and we are listening and we know that this is happening, and we are doing everything that we can to make a shift. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. We are the remembering. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. We are the remembering. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. missing and murdered Indigenous women need to be seen and heard because they are the daughters and they are the sisters and they are the mothers of our future generations.
I have goosebumps. Yeah, so
I just
thank
have
you.
to say, so proud of you, Anjamora. We are just so proud of you. And for those that might not be making the connection of what missing and murdered Indigenous women in the Native American context has to do with Ainu and diaspora, please know that there's such a big history of sexual assault and human trafficking on the bodies of Ainu people, in particular Ainu women. Our ancestors most likely were once also missing. And so I just see it, I get goosebumps just hearing it all come together in Anjamora's solidarity when expressing the need for us all to recognize this epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Anjamora, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more about that album? I believe that song was your contribution to a bigger album and a bigger movement. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was, like I kind of explained everything, but I was asked by some local members here that are in the local members who asked me if I would be a part of their project, which was a CD project, which was in collaboration with many Indigenous people from New Mexico on behalf of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And so we were all put together and we all used our voice and art through expression towards awareness for MMIW. So many people were doing poetry and many people were doing songs and dances, and it was such a beautiful experience to be able to be with people who really, really cared and really, really saw what was going on and the importance of it, because it's not talked about at all. And I feel within myself, it's really, really scary to be able to be within this society and within this world where people you feel in fear for the color of your skin or just your ethnical backgrounds, and that goes for people of all Indigenous backgrounds, including Ainu people and within the African American community and the Hispanic community, and all Indigenous peoples are really taken advantage of and walk within fear because so many people target us as less than, and it's something that needs to be arisen, and we have to rise into our power because we are strong and we are here. And so many people, like Katana said, that some people think that we are extinct, and I've actually come in firsthand with this, where people are like, wait, I thought Native Americans didn't exist anymore. And they expect us to look like your average Native American that you see promoted within the media, where it's with this huge headdress and this regalia and put on costumes and toys as if we are some object that is extinct now. And that is something that's really, really heartfelt for me. And we have to step into our power and know that we are here and that we are strong and stand in our power. So.
Thank you so much. We have a few questions about solidarity, so I kind of want to combine them. one, perhaps Anjamora, if you want to talk about this, or anyone, how would anyone show solidarity for the missing and murdered Indigenous women's movement, but then also how do people show solidarity for Ainu in diaspora and also Ainu in Hokkaido? What are your thoughts about us as a community showing solidarity and then also seeking solidarity?
I think I said this earlier before, but I think the most important thing to do is to listen to the voices of the people directly. And like I said previously, I think there's so many different perspectives, even within the Ainu community or within the larger Indigenous community. And people, I think there's, of course, always politics involved in everything. But I think that the best thing that you can do is to try to inform yourself. And try to be respectful while doing that, but while educating yourself. I think Kaya no Shigeru, as Seta said, is a great resource. I'm also trying to remember off the top of my head. There was a book of folklore by Seta. Do you know? Is it Chidi? Do you happen to know her last name? If you mind jumping in.
Chiri Yuki.
Yeah.
And her brother Chidi Masahao was he was actually one of the he might have been the first Ainu person to earn his degree at the University of Hokkaido, where he studied Ainu linguistics and was actually one of the sort of like pioneers in the academic study of the Ainu language. And his sister Yuki, who sadly passed away when she was she 16?
She was quite young.
Yeah, a rare heart heart defect. But she was able to use her time, the time that she had, to share the yukara that she learned from her utari, her unarpe, her huchi, her family. The song or the book that was published under or her collection was published under the title "The Song the Owl God Sang."
Yes, that's the book that I read through. That was my first book of folklore, and it was very moving to me. But yeah, I think that was my point. Directly.
I also want to point out too, with what Leo is saying, please, if you're going to read about Ainu or you want to learn about Ainu, learn from the genealogy of Ainu people themselves. So Kayanu Shigeru is an actual Ainu. Yuki Chiri is an Ainu. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of papers and anthropological studies of Ainu out there. None of them are done by Ainu. Things that are published by actual Ainu people, we can count, maybe if we're lucky at this point in history, maybe on two hands. There's not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot out there that's published in academic literature. I think artistic literacies, that's growing a lot more. There is I just want to say throughout there, Ainu in not necessarily an Ainu diaspora. She is from her homeland in Hokkaido, but Dr. Kitty Chisato Dubril, brilliant writer. She's put out really great articles as well as books, and she's overseen and edited books where even if there were non-Ainu researchers involved, she oversaw everything. So that would be another one that I recommend.
Chisato Dubril also was collaborated is too light of a word. I mean, she was their historical cultural resource. The Smithsonian worked with her to identify so many of the stolen Ainu remains that are Ainu material culture they probably have remains. That's a whole nother conversation. But she helped to identify a lot of the stolen material culture that the museum had collected over the decades. Most of the items were unlabeled. They were just thrown in boxes. They had very little preservation or any kind of, care for them. These were items that were stolen from Ainu homes and taken in order that the Ainu did not have them, demonstrated by the lack of any kind of interest or value that these institutions continue to have with regards to our material culture. But in the 90s, around 1997, 8, 9, the late 90s, the Smithsonian they put out an exhibition that was meant to educate people about the indigenous peoples of the Siberian region, and they collaborated with the Russian government for resources and access to those sorts of things, with the specific stipulation that they said nothing about the Ainu. That was the requirement from the Russian government for their collaboration with that exhibition. To the Smithsonian's credit, I will say, they were like, okay, we won't do it in that, but then afterwards they had a solo exhibition about Ainu culture exclusively, outside of that specific context that they were working with Russia. So they're like, all right, and here's the one you didn't hear about. But in order to do that, they had to re-identify so many of the stolen objects that were in their position. And they worked with Chisato Dubril to identify and contextualize a lot of these items. She also wrote a fantastic book about the life and work of Biki Suzunawa. I believe the book is called Playground of the Gods. So that's another great resource if you're wanting to learn more about Ainu culture, contemporary Ainu culture, art, and to a good extent, political movement. I always like to point out that it was Biki Suzunawa who did design the Ainu flag. I believe he designed that around 1978, very much inspired by the Red Power movement that was happening across Turtle Island around the same time.
I also want to give a shout out to Kanako Uzawa, who is publishing a lot of great things in academia recently. She's a recent PhD, brilliant Hokkaido Ainu with a very strong genealogy to Hokkaido. So you can look up her work as well. And surprisingly, in recent years, there's been kind of a boom in Ainu female academics getting their PhDs. So that's been really exciting. Yeah. So I also want to just throw out there too that there's a difference, in the histories of Hokkaido Ainu and the histories of Ainu in diaspora, and that's okay. Our histories intersect with one another, but as Ainu in diaspora, we don't want to, represent Hokkaido Ainu. But if you're looking for information about Ainu, I highly recommend you learn about it from Ainu authors themselves.
So this is probably a good time to ask a related question from Skylights22, who asks, what would you say to contemporary settler anthropologists looking at Ainu in diaspora, if you have anything to say at all?
I have
I
some
just
things
want
to say.
Yeah, I think we all have some things to say. I'll just want to jump in really, really, really quickly because one of the reasons I wrote my dissertation was to document our stories. And, you know, it's a little controversial to be a researcher and community member, but it was important for me to do that because I wanted these stories told through the Ainu lens. And so what I would say is research for Ainu and Ainu people have a very, very painful history. And you can take many quotes out of Kayano Shigeru's work and see you know, how painful research has been for Ainu. And so I would just say, please understand, in the diaspora, there is an extra added layer of shame and embarrassment around being because we've had to navigate you know, through the Japanese diaspora and the colonial American lens about Aboriginality. So I would just say, please, 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 if you're going to do research on Ainu and diaspora, just to be cautious of that and let our stories surface.
I'll just jump in and say, as a researcher, it's not controversial to be, I mean, I personally don't think it's controversial to be a researcher and a community member. I think that that's actually preferred, but just that's sort of like a methodological comment.
I was wanting to circle back around for a moment just about the question you asked about how to be in solidarity with this movement of MMIW or in other indigenous communities. And that's something very passionate in my heart is the women's movement of uncovering, as Katana was saying, you know, let these stories uncover. And this project that Anjamora was invited into was the vision of Clara Natanaba, a Dene, amazing singer-songwriter who teamed up with Christina Castro of Three Sisters Collective, a collective of a bunch of indigenous women, and they began to have round tables or circles with the women speaking on missing and murdered indigenous women's movement and awareness. And what I understand from Clara is that these stories broke your heart open, and it was not an easy process. And they realized that these stories are the key to the memory and then the healing that can come from it. And so they realized that can there be a way through art to bring some of these stories out into the world? And I tell you, when they made this album and they had the release event, that first woman came out and over the loudspeaker was speaking the names of, after a while, I was like, is that 1,000 women who have gone missing in the last year? And it became a ceremony of recognition in all lines. As Seta was saying, we are all indigenous in diaspora. Women particularly were the ones that were taken, suppressed, and you know, so many awful things done to. So that album they just made free to download, and it wasn't for the first few years it was out, so that their hope is that you could take this CD and listen to it in a circle of sisters, or maybe take one piece and open a circle to begin to tell our stories or talk about memories. Because after that event, it was as powerful to me as any ceremony. I went into sort of a dark night of the soul, of beginning to feel and remember things. So I highly recommend, if you can share that link to that Spirit Line album, that it's very powerful. And we could even consider that as artists, putting somehow, you know, an album together that can be shared in a conscious way, that we're bringing the art together that would bring awareness and solidarity with our indigenous relatives.
Yeah, and I just want to add, what Leo said was so aligned, and I feel just like educating yourself and knowing what's going on is so important. And awareness, because this is something that isn't talked about a lot and within the bigger media, and it has to be talked about. And also, if you go to the video that was just shared of me, I'll link a thing for where you can go visit the website of Three Sisters Collective, which will bring you to another link that will show you the Spirit Line album, and it's all free. So if you're wanting to check that out, it's there.
Yeah, for the audience, I believe the link to the album was already shared in the chat on the YouTube channel. So please scroll through that and check it out. We also put the link to Māpuana's dissertation there. So if you are so inclined to read an academic dissertation, it is really good, I'll say, because I read it myself.
Like a million times. I just have to say this, and we're talking about research too, right? It's so important for Ainu to be able to tell our own stories. And I never would have gotten that chance as a researcher and community member if it were not for Dr. Edwards, who was on my committee, right? And there were a lot of things that I was trying to say and do that people were like, no, absolutely not. You can't do that. And at that time, I didn't even know that she was Ainu. But it's so important to have Ainu in spaces to welcome other Ainu and make them feel comfortable, because there's a lot of things I could not have done if Dr. Edwards was not there to help me break through that ceiling, right? That was that other people were like, no, you can't do that. Oh, prove to me that you're Ainu. Oh, prove to me this. Oh, prove to me that. And so I just want to acknowledge that a part of respecting Ainu stories in research is creating space. And if you want to be an ally and you're in academia, create that space so that Ainu can tell our own stories. And Dr. Edwards did that for me beautifully. So, ie kere.
Yeah, there's also some interest from the audience to follow people on various, social media sites. So if anyone on the panel has a public page or presence and is willing to let people follow them, I think the audience would appreciate having links to that. And or if you know of other Ainu in diaspora or Ainu anywhere who have public presence on social media and you want to offer those links so that folks can follow, I think it would be a nice way for the conversation to continue, or the learning to continue for the audience, especially those who have expressed interest in what we've talked about today. So
if you come and check out any of my socials, Instagram or whatever, we're dishing the dirt on Marvel. That's right. Even today, Marvel is doing us dirty. So, more on that. You can, as I shared, that's my Repunkuru Instagram. You can find me there, where I try to talk about, or just showcase issues that relate specifically to the diaspora Ainu context, and as a way to kind of keep us connected to kind of the issues of the day, because it's like a lot of our problems are not new, but then they keep dropping a lot of new ones on us. So if you want to kind of like watch that page, and engage in some of the discussions that we're having about contemporary Ainu issues. You know, it would be really exciting not to hear from you know, from other Ainu in diaspora, but also allies, or, you know, people who just want to maybe learn more about what living as an Ainu person today is like, and how the different ways that we are sort of like surviving outside of our homeland. And for any diaspora Ainu who might be interested in sharing their stories or photos or artwork or anything that they'd like to express, send me a DM. If anybody's got questions about anything, send me a DM. I'm always happy to, you know, meet people kind of where they're at. I haven't had, you know, personally, I've not had any issues with people being like disrespectful or like being crazy or anything. I don't, I kind of respect folks enough to, like, you know, just send me a message, don't get crazy, and we'll, you know, and we'll connect.
I just want to say, I'm seeing a message right now. Forgive me if I mispronounce his name, Sesi or Sechi Ghosty, who's just acknowledging that she's Latine and white, and she wants to be an ally, and she hears us. Thank you for that. And if you are a non-Ainu and you do want to write and share our stories, I highly recommend looking at Anne-Louise Llewellyn, who wrote a beautiful book. She has Ainu children. She's married to an Ainu man, and she went and she's lived in Hokkaido, and Ainu women have entrusted her with their oral histories, and she approaches it from a strengths-based lens, talking about settler colonialism. And it's one of the very few pieces out there that really use this type of terminology of settler colonialism with the history of Hokkaido, and acknowledging the sexual assault and human trafficking of Ainu women, and strategic attack on ripping apart Ainu families for the benefit of the Japanese government. So if you are to write about Ainu people or Ainu in diaspora and you're not Ainu, please look at her work, because I think that it's excellent.
The last thing I'll say is that there are a couple of questions about the issues that Ainu in Hokkaido are facing, and what I will suggest to everyone is to look out for the next event that we are having, which will feature Ainu who are in Hokkaido now, and will the whole event will be centered on the activism around the issues that they're facing currently today. So if that's something that you're interested in, please stay tuned for that. Māpuana, can you share the name again, Llewellyn? Do you want to put it in the chat? I can't hear you, actually.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Seta is actually better to answer any questions about that author. I will go and try to find a link, but Seta has read that book a million times.
Okay. Well, thank you so much to everyone, for the panelists, for your time and your participation and your energy. I know that it's not easy, and thank you for the audience for hanging in there with us, and for the questions and the encouragement and the support. Everyone, really appreciates it, and we hope that you continue to involve yourself in this conversation, and that you look out for our next event. Yeah, thank you, everyone.